Today we got a question also asking about James Gunn's DC Universe.
Hey, John, this is Alan. I know we're all excited about the DC announcements yesterday, but one other thing I just saw today was that James Gunn said there will also be projects that are PG-13 and rated R. So my question to you is, which are the projects he announced and which projects do you see coming out soon that could be rated R? The Authority maybe could be one of them? Thanks. Love to hear your thoughts.
All right. Thanks a lot for saying that in. And we were alluding to this a little bit earlier, that on top of the big question about hard reboot, soft reboot, whatever, because it is James Gunn, and because he has done several R-rated things already, I mean, a lot of R-rated things in his career, but several R-rated things within the DC universe itself, a question has come up about, well, then how many are they going to, have R-rated and PG-13? I, for a long time, thought, I don't think they're going to make any rated R stuff if they're really connecting this whole universe. Because again, as I said earlier, how do you say have an R-rated, dirty mouth, whatever, Aquaman in one movie, and then bring that same Aquaman into a Superman movie that you're not going to let be rated R and have him act completely different? But again, it's James Gunn. Well, James Gunn has come out and said that, yeah, it does look like they are going to be able to give themselves the opportunity to go back and forth between R-rated stuff and PG-rated stuff. He said this, and you can bring this up on my screen if you want, Jonathan. So he said the following. Somebody was asked if there's going to be rated R stuff or whatever, and he said, it depends on the story. We're going to give every story what it deserves. Some things we know Superman, one of the things we know is that Superman definitely something we know we'd like to be PG-13. So I'm going to make sure that it is. Other things like the Waller TV show are a bit more mature. And we have other things that are aimed at a bit more at young women or at kids that are still within this world. Okay, so James Gunn does a couple of things in this statement here. He's acknowledging, again, this is all in the same world, so we got to be careful. But guess what? In our real world, there's some gentler, more PG people like myself. There are some...
Are you a PG person who wants to bring on the filthy?
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a very PG guy.
It. Uh-huh.
What?
I'm all PG all the time.
Ray.
Ann and I didn't hold hands until after we were married. Just let
That
everybody
is
know
true.
that.
That is true. I got confirmation from
Sorry, Ray doesn't want to talk about that topic.
No, ever in my life.
Knew off the top.
Should that ever be talked about, ever. Ever.
Sorry, I didn't even think about that. And then you got some more mature things in our world, right? So James Gunn's acknowledging both, but I like what he said. Look, it'll depend on the individual project. By saying it depends on the individual project, that is him clearly saying, yeah, there's going to be R-rated stuff. I mean, he said right off the get-go, Waller is clearly going to be R-rated. It's coming out of that Peacemaker kind of side of the universe, Suicide Squad side of the universe that he's been building already. And so, yeah, there's that. Guys, we want to thank a sponsor of this video, Mint Mobile. If saving more and spending less is one of your top goals for 2023, why are you still paying insane amounts of money every month for your phone bill? Switching to Mint Mobile is the easiest way to save money this year. As the first company to sell premium wireless service online only, Mint Mobile lets you order from home and save a ton, with phone plans starting at just $15 a month. Guys, I have told you before that when I was on one of the major phone carriers, I was spending literally 3 times as much every month, and switching to Mint Mobile couldn't have been easier. So for people just looking to save some extra money this year, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and switch easily in just minutes with eSIM. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/Campea. That's mintmobile.com/Campea. Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Campea. So then that brings up the question, which other ones, which other projects do we think could end up being rated R? So let's go over and look at the list here. Let's bring up my screen here again for a second. You're gonna have to shrink that one in. So, I mean, first off, we already know that this one is not going to be one of them. Superman, like, so he specifically says, look, we got Superman. That ain't going to be rated R. So we know Superman is not going to be one of the ones. The Authority.
It has to be rated R.
I think you're right.
I mean, the comic was basically the Authority was kind of a precursor to the Boys, if anybody. I mean, but with much more of a Justice League feel. It's a much bigger. They're traveling through the bleed and all that, but it was definitely. And the two main characters are in a gay relationship.
That doesn't necessarily make it rated
That doesn't
R,
make
though.
it
Well,
rated
you
R.
gotta come on with what they do. Come on,
You wanna
see
say
some,
that?
They
I
don't
want to see
have
some
to-
hardcore
They
superhero
don't
man
necessarily
on man
do the things they do in the comic book.
Robert Meyer Burnett coming here for the hardcore man-on-man action.
Here's
I
the
love
problem,
it.
though. Here's the problem with that, though. If your theory is right, and we don't know that it is,
Right.
but if your theory is right that like they're setting up the Authority to be the de facto villains of the Gods and Monsters
Yep.
phase, then that becomes problematic because that means you're going to have the Authority in with Superman. You're going to have the Authority with Batman. You're going to have the Authority with, and so can you have them be this hardcore R-rated thing here, and then all of a sudden they're not in all these other projects?
Well,
it makes it a little challenging.
I think you're right, but I think it's like if they bring it, for instance, it's the way the Authorities deals with criminals, for instance, like
Right.
Apollo taking somebody and, but we as an audience, because we've seen The Boys and we've seen Joker and we've seen Peacemaker and Suicide Squad, we can kind of, I think, no longer is there the thought that superhero shows and movies are for kids. They've moved into a more mature level. They're now the number one top grossing genre of film maybe ever. And I think that there's a level of maturity that's expected on the part of the audience. And that's why I think obviously we start as kids loving these characters, and then we mature up as we move through the pantheon of animated series, comics. I mean, comics themselves have become really R-rated.
Sure, but remember the most profitable ones are all PG-13. Like it's very, very
Sure.
rare that you get an R-rated one that nudges into the $1 billion.
But I do think you can have, we just haven't seen it yet. I think you could make an R-rated Authority movie, but then move them over as villains in a Kingdom
And
Come
scale it back a little bit?
Yeah, like you wouldn't have the violence and the sex.
Okay, so let's keep going here. I don't think anybody else will disagree that The Brave and the Bold will definitely be PG-13. Especially, I mean, it depends on how old they age Robin, but still, I think it's pretty safe that Brave and the Bold is going to be PG-13. All right, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. My first thought is to say, obviously, PG-13. But that being said, when they were describing the Supergirl project, right, let me read this last thing, this paragraph. When they were describing the Supergirl project, they said this: we see the difference between Superman, who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents from the time that he's an infant, versus Supergirl, who was raised on a rock chip off of Krypton, watched everyone around her die and be killed in terrible ways for the first 14 years of her life. In anybody else's hands other than James Gunn, we say definitely PG-13. I'm going to say there's a 10% chance here that maybe this Supergirl project, they really want to differentiate, because in a lot of iterations, Supergirl is just a female version of Superman.
Right.
If they really want to differentiate her in the hands of a James Gunn, I mean, so I'm going to say 10% chance that Supergirl is rated R. What do you
Well,
think?
even you look at the line right below what you just read, and it says this is going to, that James Gunn says this will be much more hardcore.
It's much more
But Rob
hardcore.
brings up a good point. So much of the differentiation between a PG-13 and an R rating really comes down to violence, language, and sex, with language and sex being the biggest ones. You can still have a lot of violence in PG-13, but the second you show a little butt crack, you are definitely in rated R territory.
I totally agree with that. And like, what if Supergirl's more like Conan the Barbarian, like John Milius' Conan, where horrible childhood forges her into the person that she is, and she's basically one step away from a Viking in a way, and comes to Earth and her ways have to be tamed, and the only person that could do anything to tame her ways is her cousin, Kal-El.
Right.
And that could be, I mean, she could be, and not understand. Can you imagine if somebody who's raised in a hardcore environment finds her way to Earth, and the first time she gets in some kind of scrape, she ends up pulling somebody apart limb from limb, not understanding her own power under a yellow sun? I mean, that could be really interesting and hardcore. But then again, her character arc could change her from an R-rated character into a PG-13 character, and we see that arc happen.
All right, so that's Supergirl. Now we get into the one thing that I think is the number one thing on the movie side that I think is clearly going to be rated R, and that's Swamp Thing. Yeah. They're already saying that this is going to walk the line of being a straight up horror film and all that kind of stuff. I'll go so far as to say this: I'll actually be surprised if they say it's not an R-rated thing. I don't know, Rob, what do you think?
I don't see that they can do it and not make it R-rated, especially if you lean into Alan Moore's run, which is sort of the definitive run of Swamp Thing. Even as Len Wein started Swamp Thing out, it's a horror comic that delves into some dark stuff and weird stuff too. So, I mean, there's always elements of body horror in this, Cronenbergian body horror, and I think that a PG-13 Swamp Thing movie would be a little, I think, disappointing. I mean, this has got to be hardcore horror.
Hardcore Rob.
Hardcore Rob Day
right now, and I'm living for it.
Send them your scripts. All
Don't
right.
send me your scripts. Don't.
We now move over to the television side. And listen, this is their animated one. I absolutely see them going out, especially since the Weasel is going to be a part of the Creature Commandos. Weasel murders a lot of men, women, and children. I don't see any way around it that Creature Commandos is not going to be rated R. Any disagreements in the room?
No.
No, yeah, this one's not going to be Disney TV. Waller is clearly going to be rated R. This is the same world as the Peacemaker world. That was clearly extremely rated R. They're going to go rated R on Waller, no doubt. Lanterns. Now, here's the interesting thing. I would have said Lanterns is a clear one for PG-13. There are two asterisks, though. Number one, they make a comparison to True Detective. So, I mean, you could have made a comparison to Matlock if you just want to say it's a mystery, right? You could have just done that. You could have just said, but no, they went True Detective. The second thing is it's HBO Max, which they clearly don't mind going. Look, I still think the odds are that it is a PG-13 HBO Max series. I go 75% that it's PG-13. But again, because they make the direct True Detective comparison and the fact that it's HBO, I'm going to say it's got like a 25% chance of being rated R. What do you think, Rob?
I think you're right. I think if anything, because the True Detective, that comparison, that first season of True Detective is a masterpiece. I mean, it is an incredible, it's definitely R-rated in terms of its thematic structure, but it really depends on what the mystery is that they're, like if they're not looking for a serial killer or a missing girl or something, if what they're going to uncover is something like the anti-life equation, or something of dark side related or dealing with the new gods or something cosmic, they can make it scary and weird. I could see it X-Files-esque. And X-Files episodes like Home slipped into the R-rated territory, but X-Files really skirted the line. I could see it still being PG-13, dipping into R-rating territory occasionally, but pulling back before it gets too bad.
Do you think that the Green Lantern HBO show, do you think they'll lean rated R? Do you think they'll be PG-13? What do you think?
I think for a lot of the HBO shows, they're going to lean into the rated R because unlike the films, they're really focusing on an audience. With HBO, you can get away with so much more. It's not TV, it's HBO, because there's not as concerned about the overall box office. You've talked before and even earlier today about how PG-13 versus rated R, just that separation of those ratings really is going to affect the overall box office. And with the streaming, they're not as worried about that. They know that they're going to get eyeballs. They've already got the subscription. So I think that the projects that are on HBO are going to lean more R, and they're going to have to be a little bit more careful about the ones that they're actually putting in the theaters where the numbers really are going to count.
All right, we keep going on down the list now, and we get to Paradise Lost. This is the one to me that's a coin toss. Because if you're again, they say they made the comparison, whereas Lanterns made the comparison to True Detective, they make the direct comparison of Game of Thrones with Paradise Lost. I think they're probably going to go more PG-13. By the way, I've seen the people. I see you in the live chat saying, "John, don't you know that they don't have our ratings in television?" We understand that. We're talking about in principle. What is its guidelines going to be?
Yeah.
There's obviously TVMA versus but talking in terms of our basic understanding of RPG, PG-13, things like that. I think it's a coin toss. I really do. I think it's there's many. This would be an easy show to make PG-13. It can be violent, it can be intense, it can be all that kind of stuff and still be PG-13. But it can very easily get into some heavy R-rated stuff too. So I'm going to call a push on this. and say 50-50. Rob, which way do you think Paradise Lost will go?
Well, on the flip side of the authority, if you're dealing with a society that's all women and matriarchal in nature, and you're doing it Game of Thrones style, the women on women stuff could happen too. But seriously, you'd have to structure a society. I'm just kidding. But you'd have to structure a society. Like how would an all woman society be structured in terms of politics, in terms of religion, being created from the gods, and sexuality would have to play some part of it because do these women yearn? I mean, Wonder Woman we saw her grow up. What would women want?
Well,
children?
she addressed. Well, Chris Pine directly asks her the question in Wonder Woman's, and Wonder Woman actually directly addresses that.
There's no, and I think that they're simply because you have a matriarchal civilization. It really depends on what they're going to show you, because if you're dealing with the internal machinations of Paradise Island and what's going on, I think you could do something really hard hitting and interesting. But on the other hand, it is still Wonder Woman. And it is still ultimately, you're going to want mothers and daughters to watch this show, the people that were the audience for the Wonder Woman films, wouldn't you?
But again, you can have relationships and it not be rated R.
It's
I
true.
mean, there's nothing about that. I know.
It depends on the tone. They said Game of Thrones. I'm thinking R rated.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that too. So I don't know, Aaron. R-rated, PG leaning? They're making the comparison to Game of Thrones. What do you think?
I would love for Paradise Lost to be R-rated, specifically because I want there to be the viciousness of the hierarchy that we saw in Game of Thrones. I want there to be the violence, which I think that there will be. And yes, obviously, we're going to see some incredible love stories. And again, I'm encouraging James Gunn to reach out to Ashley Lyle, who did Yellow Jackets, because the dynamic between women is really a fascinating thing, and this can be so well done and have so much intrigue. There's some people in the chat that have been mentioning that I did Spartacus, because we were talking about who's the PG-13 one in here. Obviously I am clearly not, but even with one of the things that was great about Spartacus is that in the writing of Stephen S. DeKnight, he showed the power positioning of the women with one another and how vicious that can be. And also the beautiful friend relationships, the platonic relationships, and also the romantic relationships. I think that this has the potential to be an unbelievable show. And I think that with an R rating or a TVMA rating, they not only could get into the romantic relationships, but also get into the brutality that would absolutely exist in this world as well. I'm here for the R. By
the way, I while we were talking, I put up a poll in the live chat just asking you guys, our viewers, a simple question I asked. I said, will Paradise Lost be R rated? It's closer than I thought. 59% think yes, it'll be R-rated. 41% say no, it will not. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes.
Can I just say that Aaron Cummings might have just coined my new favorite phrase of 2023?
I'm here for the R.
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 Right up with Bring on the Filthy. I'm here for the R.
Yes.
R for redhead.
All right. The last one on the list they've got here is Booster Gold. And at first, my first thought was, well, it's going to be a lighter comedy. They're going to go, but you know what? The more I thought about it, I think this one will probably be more in the vein of Peacemaker. I think this one will probably, and I think a trend and a theme is popping up here. I think they know their harder core. Now, Swamp Thing notwithstanding, I think their harder core R stuff is the stuff they're shuffling over to, and then other than Lanterns, which I think is probably going to be PG-13.
You might be right about this.
But I think and this is just a guess, I'm guessing Booster Gold will go, they already said it's comedy. I think they're going to go full blown into the Peacemaker style of comedy on this one. So Booster Gold, R or PG-13?
Dude, it could go either way, but I think an R-rated Booster Gold would be way more fun than a PG Booster Gold would be.
But then I wonder, does it then get too much into the comparisons of The Boys and Peacemaker?
Does it matter? As long as people watch? And that's what I'm wondering about. If the rate, because
no, you're right.
The
you're
Peacemaker,
right.
No, because you're not wrong. I'm just on top of that as well. Is that Peacemaker was the #1 show in the world. So that style of humor brought into the world of DC seemed to work. So look, it's like the comparison I make in my head was when I first saw ads for Parks and Rec, I avoided the show for its first year and a half because I thought it just looks like another The Office. It's just The Office all over again.
Yeah.
When I started watching it, I found out, number one, I was right. It is really just another Office.
Yeah.
But number two, that didn't matter because it was hilarious and one of my favorite shows of all time now. So maybe that's their thinking on Booster Gold.
I mean, if you wanted to go the R-rated route, you could make Booster Gold somebody more like an Andrew Tate character where he's talking about chicks and making money and all this and I'm from the future and I've got all this power and what are you going to do about it? And I've got all these endorsements and I would be so there for that if they leaned into more of, because that's kind of what Booster Gold is. He comes back, he sets himself up as a capitalist superhero and loving life and going to parties and hanging out and
but that has a real short time limit on it, and so it's like, how far can you take that gimmick? You know,
but I mean, but that's his journey. You know, his journey is that's how he begins. But then when he comes to Earth and he interacts with the other superheroes, and he finds his moral compass.
Okay, I hear you, and I don't totally disagree with you. Personally, my taste is I'm not really here for the Andrew Tate redemption story.
Well, no, I just use that as a shorthand example.
It's like, okay, go have your journey and then come back to us when you're ready to be an adult.
Perhaps that was that was my shorthand. That was what popped into my mind.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
Media savvy character that makes money and talks a lot of stuff.
All right. Guys, the question is for you. It's been made clear by James Gunn. Some stuff is going to be rated R. The question is going to be which stuff will be, which stuff won't be. Is it going to be kind of even? Will it be a couple of things will be rated R? A lot of them? I don't know. Whatever you guys think they're going to do here, jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.